Welcome to the Relearn Learning Festival Game Changers podcast wrap up for Tuesday, the 10th of November. We're your hosts, Phil
and Adriano.
Adriano, who we got with us today?
Well, we've got two fine gentlemen from North America with us. We've got Dwayne Matthews and Will Richardson. Dwayne, I'm calling you Dwayne Matthews today because yesterday I got it totally wrong. I think you've seen a tweet where I referred to you as Dwayne Johnson, and some of the women in our conversation were very excited they were about to meet The Rock. But anyway, that's a whole other conversation for another day. You are our favourite Dwayne, as long as you're very, very conscious of that. I might ask both of you gentlemen just to perhaps introduce yourselves to our audience, please. Dwayne.
Sure. So thank you very much. I'm it's great that I'm your favorite Dwayne. My mom prefers Dwayne The Rock Johnson herself, but I'm accustomed to being second. Nothing wrong with that. I'm Dwayne Matthews. I'm here in Toronto. I'm the head of a little outfit called Tomorrow Now Learning Lab, and we look at the intersection between fourth industrial revolution technologies, the future of work, and the future of education.
And I'm Will Richardson. I'm trying to figure out who, if you confuse me with someone who I'd want that to be, maybe Will Ferrell or someone, I don't know. But I'm
thinking John Malkovich at the moment, because if we're going to.
Oh, no, but I thought it had to be Will, since it was Dwayne and Dwayne. First name thing. But anyway, I'm the co-founder of the Big Questions Institute with my good friend and colleague Homa Tavangar, and we're basically working to try to help educators make sense of this moment as much as that's possible, and try to make sense of what the future might hold in terms of the changes we need to create in education, given the challenges that we're going to be facing here in the next decades.
Well, thank you both very much for joining us here today. You know, as I was looking at some of the sessions for Tuesday, what was coming very, very clear was this issue of control and helping educators to let go of that feeling that they need to control everything in what they're doing. I wonder, Will, whether you might share a little bit of your understanding of the whole notion of control versus empowerment.
So I think empowerment is a really interesting word, because I'm not sure that we have power to give. I'm not sure it's that we are giving power to kids or giving power to teachers as much as it is creating space for them to use their own inherent power. And so that word is a little bit interesting. And as a former English teacher, I'm constantly trying to parse language that we use in education. Look, I think that we all would agree that learning requires freedom. Learning requires agency. If we don't have choice in the things that we're learning, we're not going to learn them. And I think that's one of the challenges that we have in schools today, is that kids and teachers, to some extent, don't feel like they have a lot of freedom over the things that they're pursuing in terms of learning and doing and creating and sharing and all that kind of stuff in school. So it's not so much about giving them power as it is just making space for that power to happen, creating conditions for them to use the power that they have. And again, that just requires that we free up a lot of the systems and the structures that we have in schools right now.
I might stay with you for a second, Will, and just follow that line of thinking. How do you think we can go about supporting school leaders in particular to reframe this conversation around this notion of permission and giving their staff and themselves the freedom to then allow young people to leverage their agency and their voice?
Well, there are a whole lot of reasons why this is hard to do, unfortunately. A lot of them are just legacy mental models we have about school. A lot of them are the experiences that all of us had when we were in school. We didn't experience freedom in school. So basically to come and say now that we should shift that and make that kind of the norm in the ways that we think about learning in classrooms is really difficult. To me, I think it comes down to the one fundamental question, the big question that all of us should try to develop a coherent answer around, and that is, what do we mean when we say the word learning? I think if we don't have a coherent, consistent, shared definition of that word, I don't think a lot of change will take root. And I do think that if we have that conversation, we look inwards as learners, we look at how learning naturally occurs in the world, in our kids. I think, again, freedom is a fundamental element of that. And so that's a starting point. If we can say, this is what we believe learning is, then we can work toward that. We can change narratives. We can change kind of the way people think about what the classroom is supposed to look like. We can change assessments. We can change just about everything. But too many schools, very few schools, in fact, don't have coherence around that word. So that's an issue.
You know, I really enjoyed hearing Mark McCrindle talking about the generation of today. Hello, we've got another visitor. Hello, welcome to Game Changers.
We're talking about you.
We're talking about you. Please join us.
It's interesting that he came out. You know, we're talking about empowerment, and one of the interesting things is the presentation that I had today was done entirely by my son. So we sat down and I said, hey, you know, I'm accustomed to doing these things live in person. What can we do? And I said, you know what, you come up with something, you have 24 hours and sink or swim, we're going with that. And, you know, he was able to put in a bunch of time. What were some of the things that you did?
I connected them on iMovie. We made like different videos on clips.
Mm-hmm.
And then we used some of those techniques.
Right, so we use some of the techniques, we use clips, we put them on iMovies, we have to bring in all the different things. Did we use Oculus as well? Right, and so what was interesting about all of that was, you know, I had an essential challenge that I needed to get done, and then I sort of let go, and I said, you know, sink or swim. I go, a lot of grown-ups, big festival. I go, let's see what happens. And I think the big piece about that is really connecting school to life. Typically what we've done is we've connected school to university or post-secondary education and assessment. So we get really creative at the beginning when we feel that the stakes are lower. And when we get to somewhere around middle, you know, on a way to post-secondary education, everybody comes back to, okay, you know what, we have to get serious and go back to what we know, because the gateway is post-secondary education. And for us to get through that gateway, we have to have the marks. And so that means we have to go back to very classic things to sage on the stage. I think as school starts to connect more to work and this idea of lifelong learning in terms of the future of work, I think we're going to start to see that shift and change, moving more and more people in education, probably a little bit more naturally than us having to force it.
Yeah, it was interesting hearing Anne Nock in her workshop last night, Sydney time, talking about the sorts of things that you need to do to get people going on their journeys as well too. I was going to say earlier with reference to what you were talking about with freedom, we were listening to Mark McCrindle talking about Generation Alpha and their love of freedom. I think if you don't recognize that love of freedom that kids have got, and link it to some sense of autonomy, some sense of self-determination in their learning, you're just not going to connect really strongly anymore. And again, Adriano, I enjoyed hearing our favourite Judge McKechnie talking about the contributive learning. So helping us to think about different ways of learning, different ways of constructing what learning might be, and blending that notion of learning and social purpose together.
You know, one of the people that I encountered last night was Hector Grimaldo, who's going to also be on our second serve show. And the session that he focused on was dreamers and doers. So my question to both of you is, what is the place for wonder and awe and waking up and chasing your dreams in a learning community? You can go ahead, Will, if you'd like.
Well, I think that's what it's all about, right? I mean,
yeah.
I think that, you know, the most powerful learning happens when we are fully, deeply engaged, and when we are pursuing a goal that matters to us, when we're trying to answer a question that matters to us, when we're curious about something that we don't understand. But again, it always comes back to it's our choice. It initiates with us, right? It's not usually something external. We can be exposed to things that other people have passions for or interests in, and we might tap into those as well. But ultimately, you know, again, it's our decision to pursue that. And I mean, the things that give us wonder and awe are definitely places that we want we want to live both intellectually and physically and all that kind of stuff, emotionally. So yeah, I mean, the more that, again, that we can create conditions in classrooms for those types of experiences to happen, the better.
That would, though, require so many of the adults within learning communities to give over control.
Well, but so the sad reality is that I wonder how many teachers feel wonder and awe in the classroom any longer.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that if you're not carrying as an educator wonder and awe into your work, then that's not going to be a great condition for for having students feel.
And that's our research. Essentially the around it, character education, which we've been doing now for a number of years and all over the world. And we thought we were going to learn a lot about kids and how you teach for character with kids. The really unexpected finding that came about over the last couple of years is fundamentally that as teachers, we teach who we are. And, it sounds really obvious, doesn't it? But, to put some both quantitative and qualitative research behind it. If we teach who we are, Dwayne, how are we going to help people to feel confident and to access that sense of wonder and awe rather than fear if they feel as though the future's rushing towards them and they're anxious about it? How do we belay that fear?
So I think what you do is you stretch it out. So right now, we went to school. I talked a little bit about this in my presentation. We went to school with a definite start point and a finish point at about 25, right? That was the sort of assumption. So you had K up until you're about 25 years old, and you can remember your parents, hoping that you would skip forward or skip a class. He's really smart, he skipped the class, and this sort of stuff. And that's because your real life started at the end of however far you got in post-secondary. So whether you got all the way to your terminal degree and you became a doctor, or you got to your master's, or you stopped at undergrad, but your real life when you went to work started at that point. And so you were in a rush to get to that space. And so we've sort of been raised to be rushing. So we have 192 days and we're rushing through, about 4 years of content in 192 days. Well, if you stretch that out, if we're going to be lifelong learners, then we have time. So even though the future is rushing really quickly, we have a lot more time. If we can engage our digital tools around us, then we have a lot more time, because we don't have to remember everything and we don't have to prove that we remember everything. We can do a deep dive into things and we can pivot. We can separate essential and we can really get into those deep dives. So I think, that's the best way for me to think about how do you change the perception of time when it comes to the future and having that sense of agency.
And of course, that's the thing when you talk to teachers in schools, real teachers, not us, although, it's great having an English teacher and an art teacher and a history teacher and an elementary school teacher gather around a virtual fireplace. But for the people who are still teaching all day, every day, the most precious thing that you can give them is that sense of time, that sense of elongation, so that they can go really deep into their stuff. Dwayne, what's your son's name?
My son's name is Hayden Michael.
Hayden Michael. Will you please thank Hayden Michael for us? He slipped out while somebody else was talking, so we didn't get a chance to say thank you to him, but it was great to have him along. Adriano, I'm going to throw over to you to wrap this up.
Yeah, just before I do, I'm just really interested in the final thoughts from both of these gentlemen. I'm experiencing more and more the young people in our care today have a consciousness, a deep consciousness of the big issues, things that are really impacting upon who they are and of course, our global kind of context, things around race, things around climate, things around, inclusion, diversity, and so on. It appears to me that there's an appetite for these young people to be part of the solution. What's the best way that we can get out of their way and just simply allow them, to create some of these answers?
Well, you want the best way or the easiest way?
Either way, mate, either way.
Well, I mean, the easiest way, well, maybe it's not the easiest way. The easiest intellectual way, I think, is to just start anew. Just let's reimagine it. Let's build it up from the ground, because I think that it's going to be very difficult for schools in their current iteration to make space quickly enough for kids coming in to change the world in the ways that you're talking about it, in meaningful ways. I mean, it's a heavy lift for schools in their current iteration. And I think what you're seeing is too, that there are lots of new schools popping up on the edges right now. I mean, I can't even believe how many new types of experiences kids are being, put into or offered. That is really important. That's really important, and it's exciting. We're kind of, like in between stories right now. I really believe that we're moving away from that traditional story and we're moving towards something new. We're not quite sure what that looks like. I don't think it's going to be standardized, but right in the middle here, it's really hard. It's really hard and really challenging right now, because we can feel this old thing isn't working anymore. And the kids are telling us that. The kids are constantly just telling us that. So I think, again, it comes back to trying to figure out where kids' interests and passions lie, and making space for those things to flourish in classroom settings, and being there to support them and to push them and to really nurture them through the learning experiences that they want to have.
Dwayne, I'll give you the final word, my friend.
So I think the big thing is we have to get over our addiction to content. We have to realize that content is now a commodity, and being able to sift through, organize, and sort the information or the amount of data we have coming in is really important. And then making school more about being outcome focused. So it's it was really interesting hearing Will talk about story, and I really think about how good and how dangerous a story is altogether, right? We just saw the election in the United States, almost like 49-50%. And that's because a lot of people were holding on to a particular story of the good guy and the bad guy, and not necessarily thinking about the actual outcome itself. What's the outcome that we're after? And so I think if we focus on the outcomes and we release the stories, we're going to find that there are a lot more opportunities for us to solve problems. We're going to find that there are a lot more opportunities, and we're going to find that kids are going to be able to jump in and cut through all of that, because maybe their inexperience is actually a benefit when they come to think about just outcome focus, because a lot of the sacred cows that we have, they won't have. So to me, that really is the big focus, is to think about how do we become more outcome focused? How do we identify these stories as stories? And then think about what is it exactly that we want, which is really the difficult question that we all face in life. What do we actually want? And I think once we do that, we have enough tools to go out and get it.
I really appreciate. Sorry, you go ahead, Phil.
Oh, I was just going to say, it sounds like a life of purpose to me. Sits there, lurks around there somewhere. But no, Adriano, I'll sit back.
I was just going to say, look, it's been great to have both Will and Dwayne on our wrap-up show this morning. There is so much richness and goodness and goodwill happening so far across this Relearn 2020 festival. There's great enlightenment going on, and I take Will's point that we're probably in a space right now, that kind of space in between. And often I find that those spaces in between are those spaces where real growth and learning and reflection can occur, because it's in those moments of struggle or discernment about what's next, or whether it's a better normal or a new normal or whatever we want to call it, is going to enlighten us going forward. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your contribution to the festival today. We continue to follow your particular journey, and it's been great having you. Phil, enjoy the wonderful city of Sydney and its harbour. We know that it's really hard for you to continue to be the second best city in Australia. It's a badge that I know that you guys wear really proudly, and that glorious Melbourne, is roaring back after the pandemic.
The Game Changers podcast is produced by Oliver Cummins for Orbital Productions. It's powered by schoolfortomorrow.com and circle.education. It's available on Apple Podcasts, on SoundCloud, on Spotify, and on Google. If you like what you hear, tell your friends, subscribe, you know what to do. Let's go.